Welcome to our Vermicomposting workshop. This is the second session of the Zero Waste Ambassador at Home program. My name is Susana Moncada. I am Ciclomanias environmental educator. As you know from our previous session, this program is funded by the Take Action grant, and it is part of Ciclomanias environmental educational programs. Today we are going to cover the following topics: food waste, the environmental impacts of food production and food waste, closed-loop system, what is composting, and what is vermicomposting. I want you to think in the following questions. What fraction of food that it is produced do you think is wasted? Of the food that you eat, how much do you throw away? What happens to the food when you don't eat it? Where does it end up? According to the Food and Agriculture Organization, around 1/3 of food produced for human consumption is lost or wasted globally. This is around 1.3 billion tons per year. In developing countries, loss occur more often in the earlier stages, like food production, handling, and storage. In developed countries, the most significant losses occur at retail and consumer levels. For instance, in Canada, 58% of the food produced is wasted at retail and consumer levels. The picture that you see was taken in one of the waste audits that our team conducted in Alberta. And if you observe, most of the food wasted was never opened. Let me introduce you to the wasteberg term. The wasteberg represents our waste problem. The waste that we produce is just the tip of the iceberg. For every ton of waste that we produce, an average of 71 tons are generated further upstream in the production process, from material extraction to the point of product sale. The world population and food production are currently growing exponentially, causing an increase in greenhouse gas emission. It is becoming a paradox. More food needs to be produced, and its production has accelerated climate change. On the other hand, climate change is threatening food production due to water scarcity, land degradation, and desertification. For instance, for milk to reach our homes, it has to go through several processes before we can drink it. On farms, the cows are milked. In this stage, energy is used if the milking machines are automatic. Water is used to clean the farm, and cows generate waste. Finally, the milk is transported to the next stage. In the factory, the milk is pasteurized and packaged. In this process, energy is used to operate the equipment, water is used to clean, and waste is generated. Once the milk is ready, it is transported for sale. In the store, energy is used to keep the milk cold. Water is used to clean the place, waste is generated, and we go to the store to take the milk home. Activities such as agriculture and livestock are responsible for a large part of greenhouse gases. According to Canada's government, 10% of Canada's emissions come from crop and livestock production. The energy we use to produce food also generates polluting emissions. According to the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, the food sector currently accounts for around 30% of the world's total energy consumption, and it is spent solely on transportation, processing, packaging, and storage of food. That is why it is so important to consume fresh and local products. In summary, there are three main food waste environmental impacts. Greenhouse gas emissions. Greenhouse gas emissions result from the decomposition of organic matter in municipal landfills. Groundwater contamination. When landfill waste degrades and rain rinses the resulting products out, leachate is formed. This liquid contains organic and inorganic chemicals, heavy metals, and pathogens. It can pollute the soil and groundwater. Lastly, land degradation. When plastics are deposited in the green bins where we collect compostable waste, They break down into microplastics, and the compost produced with this waste will contain microplastics that become a potential risk for animals' health. The topsoil is affected too. The topsoil is the outermost layer of the soil. It contains the highest concentration of organic matter and microorganisms needed for plants to survive. Half of it has been lost in the last 150 years, owing to several causes, including plastic pollution. Let's talk about the natural waste cycle. As you can see, waste is in between quotation marks. Why? Because in nature there is no such a thing as waste. Therefore, this illustration explains the natural food cycle. When animals or plants die, they decompose in the soil. The decomposers, like earthworms, bacteria, fungi, insects, and microorganisms, eventually break the plants and animals into rich soil. This rich soil feeds plants that eventually will be eaten by animals to make them stronger and allow them to grow and get back to the closed-loop system, or circle of life. In nature, there is no waste generation because everything is used into the system to produce life and recycle it into a closed-loop system. We live in a system where everything is integrated. As the first law of ecology states, everything is connected to everything else. It reflects the existence of elaborate network of interconnections among different living organisms and between populations, species, and individual organisms and their physicochemical surroundings. What is composting? Compost is a product obtained through a biological decomposition process called composting, in which different microorganisms are responsible for degrading organic matter, such as leaves and kitchen scraps, into a rich and natural fertilizer to be used in your garden and indoor plants. Compost has an earthy appearance without odors or pathogens. Compost contributes to the reduction of organic matter that is taken to landfills, and it can substitute the use of chemical fertilizers. The use of compost has many benefits. It provides organic matter to the soil. It provides nutrients for the development of plants naturally. It improves moisture retention, therefore saving irrigation water. It feeds and attracts earthworms. It improves the pH of the soil. It reduces the use of chemical fertilizers, and it reduces the amount of organic matter that goes to the landfills. What can be composted? All organic matter can be discarded in the green bin. This is a guideline of what you can put in it. According to the City of Calgary, the use of the green bin has meant a 50% reduction in the amount of residential waste ending in the landfill. It is important to keep out items that contaminate compost. Removing these items helps to produce high-quality compost that will be used at local farms, gardens, and in our community. When buying compostable bags, look for the certified compostable logos on the box. These bags will be tinted green or brown and will have the certified compostable logos printed directly on the bag. This is something that we'll be covering in more detail in our next session. Composting provides means of accomplishing the 3 R's. The amount of organic matter sent to landfills is reduced through composting. The organic matter is reused in our gardens or even agricultural fields to grow vegetables, and it is recycled into a useful soil amendment. Composting is a great example of a closed-loop system because our food waste is used, recycled, and transformed into a natural fertilizer. There are different types of composting methods that can be done at home, and today we're going to talk about one of our favorite composting methods, vermicomposting. It is a composting technique that takes advantage of the degradative capacity of worms. The word vermicomposting comes from the Latin word vermi, that means worms. Thus, vermicomposting refers to composting with worms. The principle is simple. Earthworms eat organic matter that produce castings, which are worms' poop, a natural fertilizer with many unique properties. Vermicomposting has many benefits. Compared to compost, vermicomposting provides a higher germination rate. It produces an enriching soil. It reduces heavy metal availability. It reduces the need for chemical fertilizers, increases plant growth and yields, decreases the amount of waste entering landfills. It reduces the greenhouse gas emissions, and it builds or improves topsoil. Did you know that 1 tablespoon of topsoil has more organisms than people on Earth? As we mentioned before, topsoil is the outermost layer of soil. It has the highest organic matter and microorganisms concentration, and it is where most of the Earth's biological and soil activity occurs. It also houses many organisms. It takes anywhere between 200 and 500 years to make 1 inch of topsoil. As we mentioned, topsoil has been affected by the presence of microplastic, which end up in the topsoil. However, vermicomposting builds and improves topsoil. Now let's take a closer look at the amazing earthworms who help to improve the topsoil. The earthworms have a mouth in the first segment of their body, and as they dig the soil, they extract nutrients that come from the decomposition of organic matter. The earthworms are vital for the health of the soil since they carry nutrients and minerals to the surface through their byproducts. They dig tunnels, and these tunnels oxygenate the soil. Earthworms are terrestrial invertebrates, and they have a smooth skin. And the interesting fact is that they don't have lungs or any specialized respiratory system. The earthworms breathe through their skin, and worms need a certain degree of humidity to keep their skin moist. The body of the earthworms is made up of rings, and these segments are covered with tiny hairy spikes which the worm uses to move and dig into the earth. The clitellum is a thickened glandular and non-segmented section of the body wall near the head in the earthworms, which secretes a sticky sac in which the eggs are deposited. Their eggs look like lemons with a golden yellow at early stages, and they turn into red before hatching. The eggs hatch in about 21 days under warm conditions, and each egg can hatch up to 3 worms.
Welcome to Ciclomanias online tutorials, and today it's my pleasure to introduce you to the world of vermicomposting. And for those that are new, the term vermicomposting means actually making a compost using earthworms, or also called red wigglers. So these worms actually has the capability of transforming organic material like kitchen leftovers into a beautiful, rich and nutritious natural fertilizer that you can use for indoors plants and also for your garden. So today I'm gonna walk you through the process of how to set up a vermicompost and using your vermikit, and how to also actually maintain and manage any issue that you may have, like fruit flies and things like that, that sometimes happen when you're not managing correctly your vermicompost. And finally, I also gonna explain you how to separate or harvest your worms, which you want to continue using into the system, from the castings, which is actually the natural fertilizer made of worms' poop. So I hope you enjoy it. So when you order your vermikit, this is what you have. So you have a magnifier, a couple of coffee filters, of course, the main characters, your worms. You have a vermikit manual with a lot of instructions that we're gonna go over today in detail. You have also a bag with soil and the bedding. So all this is what you need to start your setup. And besides your vermicompost, I will ask you to have also at hand a plastic container with a lid, and the lid is important that has holes. So make sure you ask an adult to help you with the holes. What I usually do as well is with a hammer and a nail, you can actually have made the holes like this. But ask please an adult to help you with that process, so it provides some ventilation for your vermicompost. And it's so important to have it because you don't want to end up killing your worms. So let's start with the first step, which is the bedding. So we have in your vermicompost what the bags that indicates bedding. So bedding is actually a combination or a mix of shredded paper with cardboard, with peat moss, and cardboard, also the cardboard from the egg carton. So all this material is so important to have it because it's the one that is gonna retain the moisture. And then also the bag that you get from your bedding, you can also use it as part of the bedding. So make sure you can include that bag as well into the bedding. So here you just want some pieces. Make sure that the bottom of your container is covered, press, and then after that what we need to include is our beautiful worms. So we welcome our worms to their new home. Make sure you help them spread a little bit, be very gentle with them, and make sure they are distributed into the bottom. So it will be something like that. It will take some time for them to get familiar with their new home. So that is why I recommend you to leave it for a week, but make sure you cover them with our second bag, which is the soil bag. So cover all gentle on top of them so they get used to with the material we're putting here. So use the whole package there. Reserve that bag for shredded paper that you will need to add as well on top of this soil. So make sure you have also shredded paper. So cover slightly, cover that soil, and to keep a little bit of moist, just use a spray bottle, just a little bit of water, cover, close your container, and wait for a week before you feed the system again. After a week, what we're gonna do is to include some of our kitchen leftovers. What kind of food should we include in our vermicompost? So usually what I recommend, and you have also your vermicompost in your manual, is tea bags are wonderful. So I have a bunch of tea bags. Try to cut those materials as much as you can. They love a lot of fruits, vegetable leftovers, even pieces of bread are good with moderation, all of those. Also with citrus, garlic, and onions, although I love those ingredients, it should be not so much because you also can create others. So make sure you balance those with a lot of leafy materials, banana peels. Also, if you have, so make sure that you add maybe, I don't know, like a cup of leftovers the first week after you have them. So don't saturate with a lot of food. Another important thing to add is that I also like adding is the coffee grounds. They love that, and also adds a nice smell to your vermicompost, more like an earthy smell. So make sure you add that as well. And add also crushed eggs. So the crushed eggs are good because that's gonna be the source of calcium. And those are very important nutrients that we want, especially when we are growing vegetables at home and we want to add a nice fertilizer. The calcium that comes from the eggs that gets decomposed thanks to the worms and other microorganisms are very good to have as well. So include that, a little bit of everything. And then make sure you cover with more soil and dry leaves. Also cut the leaves. And don't forget your shredded paper. Important here to actually add more dry stuff than actual green stuff. So the green stuff will be your kitchen leftovers. The brown stuff will be your newspaper, dry leaves, and also this soil. So it's like a lasagna. So then you repeat the process after a week, depending on how fast your worms are actually eating what you already put there. And again, you just add a little bit of water on top of that shredded newspaper, something like this. You cover, and in a week you do the same. So that you're gonna repeat this process until you get actually the container full of food. And then it comes the exciting part, which is separating your casting, which is the worm's poop, from the actual worms. So that's the next step that we're gonna do now. For 2 weeks or maybe more until actually your container and all the content should look something like this. Once it's all mixed and pretty much more homogeneous, so then we are ready for harvesting. That means separating the casting, which is the actual fertilizer or worm's poop, from the worms. And we want actually to separate the worms so we can use these guys back to the system and continue decomposing all the kitchen leftovers that we have. So there's many methods that you can imagine. One that we're gonna see today is using a lamp like this. So a bright light is good because, as you can see in one of your, if you do some of the vermi activities, actually worms hate light. So what they are gonna tend to do is to just burrow themselves to the bottom. So they will escape the light after a few minutes. I recommend maybe if you have the time, an hour, 30 minutes. So you start just putting a tarp, make sure that wherever you're gonna be working has a plastic, and you start doing more like a cone shape piles like this, and spread it all little by little in small piles like this. If you're working in your garden, you can do that with a plastic bag or with a tarp, direct sunlight. But if you're doing it indoors in the basement, you just make sure that you have a nice bright light like this one. So just to make sure that the worms actually goes to the bottom. You can make those piles as big as you want. Make sure that it's more like a cone shape, like a pyramid. You see the guys are gonna start going to the bottom. So then you wait for a few minutes. If you have the time, maybe 30 minutes, an hour, so you make sure that you give enough time for them to just migrate to the bottom of your pile. And then after that, what we're gonna start doing is to have two small containers. One that is gonna be containing pretty much all the castings. That should look something like this. Very fine material, wonderful and ready to use in your planters indoors or also in the garden. and the other one that it will have actually all your little guys ready to work, to go back to work. So make sure you have those two separated here. And once you give the enough time, you can start doing it, separating actually the top. If you see the worms, if you just turn it, it will be just the worms maybe on the bottom, but the top should be without castings. What I do with this top that should be ideally without worms, I use also a complementary process which includes a strainer. So if you have a strainer at home, something like this, you put that here in the strainer and with a container like this, and you actually start just shaking a little bit, and that process would help you to have that fine castings that you can actually easily use into your garden or in any planter. And then it's easier also to just pick manually the worms. And as you notice, I'm also wearing gloves, especially for those that are starting on the vermicomposting journey. It's a little bit safer, and I will say more comfortable to wear gloves that just do it directly. And it helps you also to be more gentle with the worms, so you are not afraid of touching them, and you can just start separating manually wherever you see the worms. There is also a bunch of mini worms that when they are in a juvenile stage looks like a white, so those also make sure you keep them. They're gonna become a strong hard workers, so separate those on wherever you're putting your worms. And there is also a lot of and you have a picture in your manual of eggs. So the eggs looks more like a lemon shape, yellow, like I don't know if you're able to see that, but it's once you get familiar with them, so it's easy to just take them and separate them also on put it in the container that has all the worms. So the rest is ready to just use it as a castings, and you put it on the pile that you have your pure castings or fertilizer, so container. So repeat that with the rest of your piles, and you're ready to go and start the system with your worms and ready to use your castings for plants. Well, I hope
These are the key points of today's session. In nature, there is no such a thing as waste. In nature, everything is a resource that keeps recycling into a natural closed-loop system. Organic waste is a valuable resource. Therefore, it can be placed in the green bin, composted, or better yet, vermicomposted to grow new food. It is important to avoid contaminating our compostable waste to prevent soil contamination. We can compost at home. Composting provides environmental benefits as it helps us reduce the amount of organic matter that goes to landfills. Therefore, it helps to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and it helps to reduce soil and groundwater contamination. But remember that reducing our organic waste should always be our priority, as we want to save resources like energy, water, and land. And finally, worms are our friends. And if after a rainy day you see a stray worm on the sidewalk, help it to reach the soil so that it doesn't lose moisture. Please contact us if you have any questions or if you need support setting up a vermicomposting system. Thank you for watching, and do not miss our next session that is going to be about sustainable shopping. Thank you.